You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for hitting that play button for episode 60 of the Dave Willis Podcast with guest Danny Draven. But before I get to that, I wanted to give a really quick shout out to a friend of mine and fellow podcaster, Michelle the Trainer. Michelle's not only a friend, but she's also a creative entrepreneur, engineering project manager, wellness expert, personal trainer, public speaker, and author. And she's also worked in the entertainment industry in both typecasts in IT, MIS and network engineering at Fox Studio and Warner Brothers Records, and she also is a wellness expert with many industry clients and friends, of course, too. And the show was called the Michelle the Trainer Show, obviously, and the focus is going to be on interesting shit and stuff, whatever adjective you prefer, and they will that will improve people's lives. And the show includes tech tools, tech transportation, green tech, and interviews, and it will launch at the end of this summer on iTunes and Podbean, just like this podcast. So it's very easy to find, and I'm sure eventually she'll add Stitcher, and what else comes down the pike. Also wanted to mention, you can find this show on Stitcher now. It's on iTunes. It's on Podbean. I will link to all these in the show notes. Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes if you can. It actually really helps out the show. Some of you have actually asked me about the podcast book that I mentioned about 5 or so podcast episodes ago. I'm still working on that. I still have a few obstacles that came up that I wasn't prepared for, but I am writing the podcast book. And once that's done, I will probably be creating some kind of course on Udemy. So I will obviously announce that. So I hope to have this done maybe by the end of July, is the way it's looking right now. And, if there's anybody else that you'd like to see on this show, anybody that you think would like to be a guest, feel free to contact me through my Facebook page. My website, it's davebullis.com, and that way you can just use that contact form there. Just let me know who you'd like to see on the show, and I will do my best. Coming up on the show is Mark V. Prince, who wrote and directed the British film Colin, which is a zombie film that was shot on 75 pounds. And also coming up is the guys from Awesome Asian Bad Guys. So if you have questions for those people, any of those guests, please send them in, and I will make sure to get them to them. And without further ado, episode 60 with guest Danny Draven. Hey everyone, joining me today is Danny Draven. Danny is an award-winning writer, director, and producer. After receiving his film degree from Emerson College, he moved to Hollywood, and he has edited over 80 feature films, including films for Lionsgate, NBC Universal's Chiller TV, and the Sci-Fi Channel. Danny is also the author of 3 published books on filmmaking, including the Filmmaker's Book of the Dead, which is due for its 2nd edition coming this December, which is 2015. Danny, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. I wanted to, ask you, Danny, just, as before we get started, I wanted to, just ask you about your background and how you got started in this crazy world of filmmaking.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll give you the quick version, but essentially after I finished film school, I did like most people and packed my bags, and I went to film school in Boston and packed my bags and headed out west. And when I was in LA, I pretty much I came out not knowing anyone at all. In fact, I didn't have any sort of ins or family or anything in the business. So I just kind of came out cold turkey and started looking around for any kind of film work. And there were some things here and there, some PA kind of stuff. And then at some point I ended up hooking up with Full Moon, which of course I've been with a long time since. But and then once I sort of hooked up with Full Moon, it sort of led into all kinds of things, editing and post-production and doing all kinds of jobs from PA to extra to sound design to all the way up to finally getting the chance to direct something super low budget, and then it kind of spiraled into directing again and again and again, and editing again and again and again for them. And Charlie Band, the owner, and I became pretty good close personal friends over the years, and I've known him since since '99, I think, or 2000-ish, and he would have at some point when they ended up having me kind of as a producer for hire, and I ended up doing these sort of a couple films for him, for Charlie, as a producer for hire, director for hire kind of stuff, and we've been sort of friends, and ever since, and then of course I've done my own things and I have my own company and my own post-production company, my own production company, and I've also produced other films outside of Full Moon. But as far as getting started, it was with Full Moon. They were sort of the ones. My sort of Roger Corman world of learning how to make movies was with them.
And the Roger Corman world is a phenomenal world to grow up in, because he has influenced and he has helped or launched the careers of so many people. I don't know if have you ever read that book, by the way, Roger Corman's book, How I Made 1,000 Films and Never.
Yeah, I've got a signed first edition in my library behind me. I sure do. Yeah, it's a great one. It's that was probably one of the books that inspired me to try to write something. I figured when I first had the idea to even write a book, it was like 2002, somewhere around when I was making that movie Crips, and I was just like, I should probably write all this stuff down, maybe it could be helpful, and then I was like, I'm kind of young at the time, and I was like, maybe I don't have enough experience yet, and of course eventually I did, but that was a great book. That was actually probably one of the ones that inspired me to write one. Was that? Yeah.
Yeah, and that book inspired me as well, as did Lloyd Kaufman's book.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because a lot of these great filmmaking books, and it's amazing to hear things from the perspective of people who are actually out there doing it. Which in your book, The Filmmaker's Book of the Dead, I know you touch a lot on that, and you also have a lot of really good interviews. With people like you have Tom Savini, you have Lloyd Kaufman, and you have Herschel Gordon Lewis on there. That is just phenomenal. And so in talking with the book, how did you go about putting this book together? At that point, you said you're reading Roger Corman's book, it actually inspired you. So how did you start piecing it together, get these interviews?
I'm a huge, book fanatic anyway. I have an extensive library, extensive collection of books, first editions, and all going on. I just have a lot of that, a lot of books and whatnot. And I've always wanted to actually write. Besides screenplays, I always wanted to actually write something that was nonfiction. And I try to think about, if I wrote something nonfiction, what the hell would it be? And I was like, how about something about filmmaking, something I know a lot about. So I had to sort of pitch the idea to my publisher, and my publisher is Focal Press, and they're kind of one of the top publishers on entertainment books in the world. And they publish a lot of other books on filmmaking and directing and writing and everything. So I had to come up with a concept to pitch to them that was unique enough for them to get it to greenlight it. And that's where this sort of Filmmaker's Book of the Dead thing came from. And I sort of refocused the book to be specific about making horror movies versus just a general book about indie filmmaking. Although if you read the book, it doesn't really matter what genre you're working in. You can use the information in it to make any film, but my sort of idea and the publisher's sort of idea too is to focus specifically on horrors. And that's kind of what we did in the book. And by doing that, I was able to utilize tons of awesome people that I've known and met over the years, and to get some really great inside interviews with people. I was able to use examples from my own films, like schedules and pictures from the set and all this stuff that were all horror pictures anyway, and be able to have access to a lot of the Full Moon library, as far as their photos from Puppet Master and behind the scenes videos from Puppet Master and Blood Dolls and all the different movies they did. Because if you go to the website, all that stuff is on there as well. You can watch, which is part of the book. And it just, I don't know, it was just kind of like I had this treasure trove of horror information and access to people and access to content, to pictures and posters and artwork and weird and just craziness. And then just sort of came into this collection and then putting my own experience into it from having made all these films, that became the Filmmaker's Book of the Dead. And the first edition, I actually wrote the first edition in 2009, and it came out in, I think, very early 2010. Update this thing, and that's where the second edition came about, and I was able to get another 15 or so interviews with some awesome people, and just update it, because the book, eventually cameras that I mentioned and distribution methods I mentioned, things like that, go out of date after 5 years. So I was able to update a lot of that information, and that's how we got the new one. So
when I've interviewed David Hall, who was on the show, and he actually has his own horror course. And one of the things that he always mentions is horror has such a understanding almost that you can do different things. You can experiment. That's what I'm looking for. You can experiment more in horror. And he always suggests to make the first movie you do a horror film. What do you think about that advice?
I think it's great advice. I mean, the first film I did was a horror movie, horror film, and I wasn't. I mean, I've always been a fan of horror, no matter since I was a kid. So there's no the passion was always there, but I never thought my first film would have actually been horror until I met met up with the Full Moon sort of crowd, and their whole thing, of course, was horror, fantasy, and sci-fi, and so that's I just kind of got thrown in really to the genre on the first film I made, and it kept going from there. But there's a reason that horror is a good first film to make, and the reason is the horror audience is sort of like a built-in it's sort of like a built-in audience. When you make a horror film, there's that loyal horror fan base that will check it out, and it does. They do incredibly well distribution wise, and they always have a great hook. The monster is usually the star. Whatever it's about. Like killer beavers or killer whatever it is. There's some kind of hook to it, and they're usually fairly cheap to make, and have a pretty good shelf life. So yeah, if you're looking to make a first film and you're I would say don't make a horror movie if that's not what you really, really want to make. Go make what you want to make no matter what. But if you're looking for something to sort of start with and you're a fan of horror movies, hell yeah, go out and make a horror film as your first one. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the monster is the star, and that's so true. If you go back through all the monster movies, like Jason is actually supposed to be, a bad guy, but I mean, he's got there's figures, there's shirts, there's posters, and it becomes like each movie, all the teens are just the sort of. I mean, really, there's not except for there was a few Friday the 13th where there was carryover characters, or most of the time, they're just fodder for him, or in Freddy there's a few characters, but which sort of leads me to my next point. In your book, part one, the horror genre, you actually talk about the mechanics of the monster.
Yeah.
Now, is that sort of the chapter where you take the person through actually building a monster from the ground up?
Yeah, it is. It's just, I mean, it's such a vast subject and to get into, but I I wanted to give people reading the book that may not be familiar. I mean, if you're already a hardcore horror aficionado, you could just skip that chapter if you wanted to. But a lot of people who read the book, maybe they're new to it. They don't know a lot about how sort of the mechanics of monsters work. And if you're making a horror movie, I mean, you can there's so many different subgenres you could do. But if it's specific to like a monster of some kind or a killer of some kind, that chapter would be very helpful. Because I talk about, I think, hybrids and how to combine two things together, like combine an alien and a monster together, and to make your a new character for your film or whatever it may be. But no, it's a good introductory chapter, I would say, to get started if you're not already knowledgeable in that area.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, and that's great. Because I think the monster, like we were just saying, is so critically important. And
yeah. Well, I was just going to add to that what you were saying. I mean, the monster is critically important, and you were saying like a lot of like Friday the 13th and stuff like that. I mean, we get a lot more character development, I think, sometimes from Jason and his background and where he came from, and the lake and his mother, and then what I mean. We get a lot of sort of character background from him, probably more so than a lot of the main characters in the movie who end up dying at some point. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, monsters are such great, just great elements to have in your horror story. And I think if you're going to make a horror film, you gotta choose one that is just really going to stick with the audience and sort of be there, and it's always helpful to have one that can come back and do sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel too. but just design something that people are going to be people are going to relate with. Try to humanize them too. Try not to just stick a guy in some funky mask that you find at the dollar store and give him a machete or give him some other tool that you pick up at Lowe's that somebody hasn't used yet in a horror movie, and have him just running around killing teenagers at a cabin. That's all great. I mean, that's what I think a lot of people are doing, have been doing over the last how many years. But I think in order for your movie to really stand out, you're going to really have to dig into the characters and tell the story a lot better than just a guy out killing a bunch of teenagers. Whether that character development is in your main characters or in your monster. I think it's very important to have it in both, really, to make a film that'll really stay with the audience.
Yeah, and I was taking a screenwriting course, and the professor who was teaching actually made a very good point, and that is that the monster sort of dictates the story. And after I watched the movies again, like the Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, or and it dawned on me, and I was like, you know what, it's absolutely right, because otherwise this would just be we're going to take a trip to the woods, and if there was no monster, all right, this is a trip in the woods. But it's when they come along that everything, they're the inciting incident of themselves, so then everything just goes off on its own rails.
Yeah, exactly. No, you gotta. I mean, that's really the biggest thing with horror film. Actually, any film. I mean, you really got to develop your character. I mean, Stuart Gordon taught me a lot in that department, over the years. I mean, he was my mentor and he's still a good friend. And of course, we made a movie together too. But he was the one that really helped me in that area when I was first starting out. And he always used to say, like, "Who's this movie about? Who's this movie about?" And it's great, and it's true. It's like, and then you think about it, and you think and then you think about it again, and you're like, oh yeah, he's right. Who is this movie really about? And what is this character really after? What do they really want? And who is this monster? Is he just, is it just some alien being that popped out of the water, or does this alien being have more of a story to him? Is he there for a reason? Can we sympathize with this monster and say, hey, maybe I can kind of understand why this monster is doing what he's doing, or this alien's doing what he's doing. Doesn't mean he's really good or bad, but at least there's some sort of a backstory, some way to sort of relate to the character, and so that's incredibly important for sure, and I hope to see more of that in the future. Definitely.
Yeah, and the same professor also touched upon one other thing too, and like I love all different types of genres of movies, but one thing he said is, he goes, if you look at horror, he goes, the reason horror sort of gets a bad rap, he goes, is because if you look at it from a character standpoint, he's like, a lot of the characters don't change. The reason being is it's all survival. So like if we go back to Friday the 13th, those characters don't really change. They're just surviving Jason, and the want is, hey, I want to stay alive. And yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go on.
No, I was just going to say is, just to finish up that thought, it was, they have the intrinsic goal of, I want to stay alive, but what is the extrinsic goal, which is there a goal that they need to get? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. No, I see what you're saying. But even even with a script like that, or even with a story like that, even about it being about survival, whether it's a movie like I don't know, like The Descent or something, where they're down in a cavern and they can't get out, and it's about survival. It's about getting out, right? Getting back to the top, getting back to the surface. I think at that point, the story can still develop, because the circumstances that you put your characters into will bring out their true character. So no matter, if you put them in a survival mode, their real character, in a good script anyway, their real character will start to come out, and you'll start to see who this person is behind that social mask, behind the mask that the audience has seen up to that point. So if we got somebody who maybe you like and is really cool in the beginning of the movie, and you kind of relate, and then all of a sudden, they get in a crash, and then the aliens come down, or whatever the situation is, and this person turns, the real crazy part of this person starts to come out, and we really start to see what they're all about, and I think and through the trials and tribulations through the movie, that it brings more and more out of that character, and I think that's when you're reading a script that's written by a really good writer. Is when you can constantly put your character in circumstances, and then learn more and more about them as things happen to them.
Yeah. So. Yeah, very true. Mm-hmm. And as we watch horror movies now, I think a lot of them are sort of evolving. You look at something like Cabin in the Woods. Mm-hmm. You look at something like It Follows, which is movies that just came out in the past 5-6 years. I think a lot of people, especially audiences now, their expectations are changing now, and they just maybe don't want the one that the monster just chasing after them. If you know what I mean?
No, absolutely not. And what we call that in the business is elevated horror, and it's just a matter of it. Just pretty much what that means is just something that's elevated. It's not just your kids in the cabin and they all die kind of movie. I know. So I mean, there's been some great horror, in the last couple of years. I mean, one of my favorite to come out in the last 2 years anyway is with The Conjuring, which is fantastic. I thought. I love that film. And it's just there's been the Babadook was really cool, too. But it's definitely evolving. I see what you're saying, and it's getting harder and harder to scare somebody, in a horror movie. I mean, it's so easy to be cheesy in a horror movie. I mean, because you're always, as a horror filmmaker, you're always sort of walking that line of that tightrope, I should say. You're always walking this sort of tightrope, and on one side it's people laughing at you in complete ridiculousness, and then on the other side, it's scary, and you're always kind of balancing that line of what's ridiculous and what's scary when you're trying to make a movie. And with today's audience, I think that's getting harder and harder to accomplish. I mean, you got to remember when horror, I mean, when in the old days, when film was just, starting out, I mean, you had a bunch of people in in a theater they saw a train, coming towards them in a movie theater, and they all get up and they ran out because they thought it was the scariest thing that they've ever seen, and they all actually believed that train was going to come through the screen. This is back in the old days. I think was I can't remember if that was Edison or whatever it was, and that would scare people back then. And then you look at the evolution of horror since then in the 70s and the 80s and all the way up till now. And it's definitely getting harder and harder to scare everyone. But you can do it. You just gotta come up with the right way to do it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, very true. And, because the horror audience who you're actually, going for, like, they most of the time, they're probably watching a new horror movie every week. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, watching a new one every week, and they're used to the tropes. They're maybe used to the setups. So, if someone listening to this were to take something from that, it's, you do have to do your research, and that way, when you are writing your script, if you're not writing something, and then a horror person, watching it's going, a horror fan watching it's going, oh, well, that's from The Last House on the Left, or this is from The Hills Have Eyes, or this is, it's you want to sort of. And you have to do your research, and then that way you can sort of make your own thing. And I think also, just why I mentioned those two, The Hills Have Eyes and The Last House on the Left, I've noticed a lot of horror nowadays, except for maybe The Babadook and It Follows. A lot of horror is about people, like groups of people attacking other groups of people. You look at The Purge. You look at I can't remember the name of these other movies.
Oh yeah,
a lot of these are seem to going back to throwback to the 70s, which is where it was people just attacking other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, I think you can look at what's going on today in the news, people attacking people, and so that's why horror tends to sometimes follow what's going on in the world, and there's always going to be people attacking people as long as there's human beings on the face of the earth. And so, I think that's when, you get horror to follow suit, I think, with some of that stuff, but it's just how how you tell it, and how you present your own point of view on whatever story you're telling on about people attacking people, and it can be very scary. So.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because when that came out, that was just like a shot in the arm to everybody, and that was just that was something they never saw before. Yeah, and
still scary.
Yeah, that is
it's still scary today.
Yeah, because and they combined a few things. I think they combined the serial killer. I think it was Ed Gein, and they also combined a few other things. But because horror every so often comes along, and you've got Texas Chainsaw, you've got Friday the 13th, you've got the Blair Witch Project, and it just and then you have Paranormal Activity, and they come out of nowhere, and they just are like a juggernaut. And and that's the there was a here's a little side note, just a little anecdote. There was a when I was taking we were talking to somebody, they had produced a lot of horror films, and one of the things they always mention is they said, listen, if you're going to pitch people a horror film to like investors, he says, please don't mention Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, because he said these two are the outliers of outliers. Yeah, and he goes, they made a cajillion dollars and on a budget of like 10,000-15,000. He's like, that so rarely happens.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's definitely true. I mean, Paranormal Activity, $15,000 in it, and then it gets a studio release and makes just millions and breaks all kinds of box office records, and pretty much sets producer Jason Blum up to make to do Blumhouse and all these other films and everything. And I think that's great. I mean, wow, it's just it's inspiring, actually. His story, Jason Blum, is very inspiring to somebody like me to hear. Like, wow, man, here he is. He made this movie for $15,000. It made a ton of money, and here he is making big movies like Whiplash, and he's he's working with James Wan and doing all these. It's amazing, So good for guys like that. I think that's great. But yeah, is that the standard? No, of course not. Don't think like, hey, I'm going to take $5,000 from my grandma and I'm going to go make something in my backyard that's going to make a ton of money. No. That's not common, especially now too, especially these days. I mean, you're also talking about things that happened, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, Blair Witch was what? God, I don't know. What year was that? No, 96 or something like that. So the distribution models were different back then too. The buyers were different. Everything was different at that time, and we're living in a completely different time right now, as far as distribution, as far as getting that stuff made and sold and everything too. So yeah, it's definitely not something you want to say to an investor. Yeah, like Blair Witch, this movie's going to make billions. But yeah. So.
And you touched on distribution, which I want to get to in a few minutes, because I'm interested to know about that from your perspective, and also about in the book. So just moving on to chapter 2 of the book, which is pre-production. Because we pretty much covered a ton of the writing stuff. So, but with pre-production, just as a quick summary, what are some of the most things that when you do a seminar or something, what are some obviously you can't talk about all of them, but just like maybe one or two of the most important parts that you usually tell people about pre-production?
Usually, I think one of the most one thing I like to remind people of is to, before you start making a movie, really try to understand what you want to do with it. And I think if you're planning on making something that's a web series, or you're planning on something that you want to go theatrical, you kind of have to plan for what your deliverables are going to be. So if you're planning on getting a theatrical, you're planning on taking it to Sundance, making screening it and whatnot. You might want to start thinking about what camera you're using and what lenses you're using. Really try to think about the end result and where it's going to end up, and then get that right in pre-production, and don't skimp on things that are key, and what I mean by that is like sound. I mean, I see so many people that skimp on sound on low budget stuff, like, they use camera audio, or they they just capture really crappy on-set sound and think that they can just ADR, loop it in post, ADR in post, and they end up getting a movie that just looks amateur. And just little things like, there's so many things like that you really have to look out for. But definitely good sound, and thinking about your deliverables, and just trying to hire the most professional actors that you possibly can get on your film. I know not everybody has a budget to get professional actors, and maybe they're using friends and family, which I don't recommend. But if that's the only thing you got and you're starting out, then do it. But at the end of the day, the movies are about the actors, about the story. So you definitely don't want to skimp in that area if you can. And just really try to put the money on the screen, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. Don't hire your friends and family.
Yeah. There can be many problems there too, as I can attest to. Usually, on your own projects, it's always better to just sort of be your own. Look, if somebody's, if you need some extras, or somebody's coming out to help you with craft services or whatever, that that's fine. But as far as putting friends and family and that aren't actors and giving them speaking parts. If they're just in the background, who cares? But the speaking parts, that's you're going to see the results. Of that, and you see that a lot in films. So and in the indie, low budget, ultra low budget, or micro budget type filmmaking, you'll see that a lot for sure. So. Put the money on the screen, put the money on the screen always, So if you got $5,000, you got $10,000, $20,000, whatever it is, spend that money on stuff that's going to matter. Actors matter. Quality matters. Script, of course, matters. Hopefully, you already have it in order. Post production matters, and that's a field that I'm very familiar with, and that's incredibly important to your project, and not only in having something that's sellable and screenable and deliverable and will pass quality control and so on and so forth. Just spend it wisely, be frugal, but spend it on things that will actually end up on the screen.
Yeah, and that's very good advice. Because I know you were mentioning post production, and obviously I want to get to that too, because I know that's like your specialty. So through production, which is actually chapter 3 of your book, what's some of again, I know you can't talk about everything, but what are like some of the one or two most important points that you could just give us about production of your film?
About production, as far as just tips and
basically being the let's just say I mean the way you probably will be is the director of it was also the producer, you know what I mean? So what are some of like the tips that you have as you're producing your film?
Well, one of the things I think that's very important to establish as a producer is to hire or find people who are out of school or whatever that are good. Hire people that of course know their jobs very well, but are people that are pleasant to work with, and people that are going to support you on the project. You need to put in a very firm management crew when you're doing a movie, and what I mean by that is you don't want to go out and you don't want to think that you want to do everything yourself, and that's something I did, and that's a mistake I did early on. And it was like, I'm going to produce, I'm going to direct, I'm going to line produce, and as I'm directing, I'm going to make sure the craft, and I'm doing everything when I'm trying to direct, and that the movie suffers, no doubt. And because, you're always thinking about other things and you're not thinking about what's going on in the viewfinder. I wasn't paying attention to the actors because I was thinking about the U-Haul that was about to get towed outside. That's got all my gear in it. And then, our insurance, and we're only going to do location in another few hours. And how am I going to, so I'm actually watching the monitor, watching the performance. And at the same time, my producer mind is thinking about all this other stuff. And I think I call it in my book, I call it like the war of the producer and director self. You have the producer side and you have the director side, and they're constantly kind of, when you're doing it all yourself, they're constantly kind of, bickering back and forth in your mind. And it's distracting. And, you really want to be, if you're directing, you really want to be just directing. I mean, if you're producing too, that's okay. But maybe you're not taking on all the responsibilities of what a line producer would do or a unit production manager would do. You're just making a few decisions and casting here and there. But when it's time to be on set and direct, you're just directing, and you'll get a much better flow, and your creativity will be better. You'll be more relaxed and everything. So yeah, I mean, you just gotta get together a really good crew, and always delegate, put a crew together that you can delegate responsibilities to, so you don't have to think about everything at once. And that way, when you show up, you're like, okay, I had somebody's taking care of all the art department, somebody's taking care of all the wardrobe, somebody's taking care of this and this and this, and it all just comes together. And you also get another person to contribute their creativity, the wardrobe person or the makeup person, they're coming in with their own set of skills that you don't have, or may not have. Maybe you do, but most of the time you won't. And they're contributing creatively, because filmmaking is a creative process. It's a collaborative art form. And the more you understand that going into making the film and being a collaborative person, the better film you'll make.
And Danny, I've actually done it myself too, where I've actually been the director, producer, line producer, and while you're trying to direct, you're like also putting out fires.
Yeah,
you're pulling out your phone and you're texting people.
Yeah,
you're like, oh shit, is craft services going to be okay? Because craft services, by the way, in that case, in my story was pizza, and I was like, I'll break here, and I made about, what I'd say is I've made a ton of student films. Years ago. And at that point, I was making those, and finally, once actors you thought were dependable, wouldn't show up, or
that happens.
Eventually you're like, damn it, I have to get people behind me who are, can do this stuff while I just focus all my energy on directing.
Yeah, definitely. But sometimes, look, every case is going to be a little different. You're going to have people that are like, hey, I don't have any money and I want to go make a movie. It's like, well, you can do that. I mean, you can go, you have your own camera, you can go out and you can make whatever you want, but if you really need to think about what you're making and say, hey, look, if I literally don't have any money, should I really be making a movie right now? Shouldn't I maybe save up a little bit of money? Maybe I'll save up $5,000 or maybe I'll save up $10,000, $20,000, whatever it is. I'll crowdfund it, whatever it is, and wait till I have a budget that I think that I can pull off my story with. And be happy with, because otherwise, look, you're going to run out of the gate. You're going to run out of the gate with a camera, and you're just going to be, you're going to end up with something that's just not good, not sellable, not what it could have been. And so if you're planning on making a film, and you don't have any money, it really is important to get some sort of a budget together, get a plan together, a game plan together. Don't just run out of the gate, and just because, you just want to get something going right away. Planning is so important to making any film, but particularly an independent film. Planning is just so important. You can pull favors too. You can borrow a car, you can borrow a camera, you can borrow this or that, or you get people to help. But you got to go into it with some kind of a plan. And at the end of the day, your movie will be much better. Trust me, because I've gone out of the gate. I've made movies with scripts that definitely weren't ready. I've made movies with scripts that, edited plenty of them too, with scripts that just shouldn't have been made because the budget was just so ridiculously low that when you see it on screen, you're just kind of laughing. What were they thinking? My God, it's just one of those things where it should have been fixed in the script stage. It should have been fixed in the pre-production stage. Because when you get to production stage, it's harder to fix it when you already got people standing around on the set looking at you, wondering what the shot's going to be. Fix it. Don't fix, certainly never ever fix it in post, but certainly fix it in pre-production as much as you can. Planning is definitely key.
Exactly. And, that's something that, I've been adamant about too, over the years, is just, more and more planning, more in-depth storyboarding, and also, like you just said, making sure the budget is right, and that you're not putting this together and then being like on set being like, how are we going to do this?
Well, look, production wise, one good way to really save money too during production, and I did it on a film I did called Ghost Month, and one really good locations. It depends where you live too. If you're in LA, you save a ton of money. If you're in like Kansas or something and you have like a lot of land and a lot of old barns and a lot of houses and a lot of things that you have access to for free, that's fantastic. You're going to have a fantastic movie with lots of production value, lots of different locations. But if you're in a place like LA or somewhere else, things are expensive. People know you're making a movie, and everybody's got their hand out, wanting to get paid. And what I did on Ghost Month is I shot a film on 35 millimeter film in Nevada. And what I wanted to do is I knew one of the biggest things to do would be to save money would be to have a location that we could have control of. So I ended up finding a house up in the hills, and I ended up renting it. It wasn't a film production house or anything, or through the film listings or anything like that. It was just like a house that was for rent, and I rented it for 2 months, and it was a 6,000 square foot house. It has 2 levels, and it had a lot of land, and it had like this horse thing in the back, and some this pond or this little fountain up front, and it had a separate apartment downstairs, and a 6-car garage. And I was like, man, 6-car garage. I shot on a soundstage on Deathbed that wasn't even that big, And so I said, hey, we'll rent this house and we're going to make this into our little movie studio for this shoot. So, 6-car garage is big enough for sets. So we built sets in the garage downstairs. The apartment to the side, we shot some scenes in there, and I also used that for makeup, for hair, for a green room, and we shot some scenes in there as well. Upstairs was where we shot the majority of the movie. Outside, we shot some other scenes that were in the film, and we did some run and gun shooting around the land because it was public land and whatnot, and we did some driving shots and everything. And and I took the script and I just rewrote it around that location. So sometimes you'll get a script that's done, and then you'll find a location. You're like, yeah, we could shoot most of the movie here. And then you go back into your script and you just rewrite the scenes to sort of fit around the location that you found. And that for me on several films has always been a great savings. And Ghost Month in particular, and that was not, I wouldn't say it was an easy film to shoot, especially since we were shooting on film, and there's no film cameras and no film in the state of Nevada. So we were bringing all of that stuff in from LA. And, but it went smoothly. People were at their hotels, every day, and it was very smooth. And we lived on set too. Actually, my DP, Mike King, who shot, the Manson family, I think. And, the gaffer, I said, hey, this house it's a working house. Why don't we just stay, the Keys people, why don't we just stay on set? We'll just live at the house during the production and everybody else can stay at the hotel. And that's exactly what we did. So at the end of the day, as soon as we were done, me and the DP, we would start talking, we would pre-light, or we would start talking about the next day's shots. And that's just literally in the living room. And then we would go to bed. We would just go down the hall and go in the room, go to bed, wake up in the morning, eat breakfast on the set. And then we would start talking about it. And then people started arriving, and then we would start shooting the film. And it was again, the pre-production was a good part of that. I planned that out way ahead of time. And, but at the end of the day, it worked really great. I'm not saying do that. You don't have to do that on every film, but I'm just saying if you have, that kind of, if you have a house or you have something available like that where you can utilize it in that way, it can be very beneficial to your production.
And that's an amazing opportunity too, to be able to just wake up and already you're on set.
Oh yeah, dude! I enjoyed it. They enjoyed it too, because it was like, it was particularly where we were at, way up in the mountains. It would have took me an hour to drive there in the morning and an hour to drive back. So that's 2 hours of a very, very long day where every hour is very valuable. So by sleeping on set, I just I had two more hours of the day that I didn't have, 2 more hours of rest that I didn't have, and I was able to use that to my advantage.
Yeah, I was able to do that one time as well, and the special effects guy and a couple of the PAs also were able to stay there, and they were just like, this is so much better than having to drive, because they had to get from where we were to from where they actually their home was, it was like 2 hours for them each way, and they were like, thank you, this is so much nicer to be able to wake up and be on set. So obviously you couldn't have that luxury on every film shoot, but when you do, it's like the film gods are smiling upon you, and that's something that should be cherished while it can.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not the norm, but it's not. If you're making a professional film, you're not going to see Ridley Scott sleeping on set, at the same time. But with the lower budget films, you just really have to, put your creative hat on and just really think of ways that you can save time and save money, and the more you can save time and the more you can save money, and that those resources can be used for other things, hopefully other things to make your movie better. Maybe it's a bigger actor, or an extra day of shooting, or a Steadicam, or something that you wanted that you couldn't afford before. And but a lot of that's going to come out in the pre-planning stage,
Yeah, absolutely. And, and as, we were talking before about, post-production, which is chapter 4 in the book, this is sort of your thing, because I know you're very big into post-production.
Yeah. Well, I've owned my own post-production business for a very long time. And, and I've edited, God, I don't even know. It's over 100 now. I mean, I don't, I don't know. I use aliases on a lot of things, but I know I've edited definitely well over 100 feature films, and it's just something that's been a part of me for a very long time, you know. And post-production is such an important stage of your movie, and a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people don't really think about it that much until they get there. They're just like, oh, we just got to get the movie shot, you know, just get it shot, get it in the can, you know, and once it's in the can, we can fix things in post. That's a terrible, terrible way to do it. I've gotten so many films through my post-production company with indie producers and indie productions that have been so like screwed up. You know, I had a movie that came in one time, and they didn't realize that they were recording the sound wrong. The sound guy thought he was recording it to his recorder, and he wasn't, and he was actually recording it directly into the camera, and the levels weren't set properly. So I had like 2 or 3 days of material where it was just every time somebody talked, it was I mean, completely unusable dialogue. I mean, to the point, and this is not, you know, maybe $100,000 movie, you know, but you know, their dialogue, it was so bad and so indecipherable that I couldn't even cut the scene because I couldn't tell what they were saying. So they had to go back and they had to actually, I think they had to ADR all that stuff, like look at the script and try to match it up, and then, you know, I mean, it was a disaster. I have a million stories like that, but you know, that's one case of something where, hey, somebody wasn't on set paying attention to what's getting recorded on camera, you know, and it's just simple stuff like that. And, you know, I'm always saying that sound is a very important thing to get right during production, because that's, you know, if you have bad sound in post and you got to bring actors in and do ADR and all that stuff, you got to remember, you know, as a director, you know, you capture something on set. You're capturing a performance, you know, and there are so many things in an actor's voice, you know, just little things, the way they say it, you know, just the way they say a line and the way their voice cracked at this particular moment. And you capture that on set and it's great. Then you get it into post and you're like, oh, the audio's bad, or there's like somebody broke a beer bottle in the background and we didn't shoot it again, or we didn't get, you know, I mean, and then you have to bring them in and they have to ADR the line. Well, you know what? The performance isn't the same. You know, yeah, you know, you can match up their dialogue and it'll be okay. But it wasn't what you caught in the moment on the set. Now that's just my personal opinion, you know, but that's something I've seen happen in a lot of movies, you know, and I think it's something that can be avoided just by having better sound, better, you know, a better producer or a better tech person on set to really make sure everything every day is getting done right. So when we get to post, everything is smooth, you know, and that can be a lot of different things, you know, from recording wild lines to, you know, making sure you're recording room tone to just shooting the proper plates, you know. I mean, I can't tell you how many films that I've edited for lots of different people, including Sci-Fi Channel, where they didn't have proper, you know, plates shot, and I would pull plates for the effects guys off of tails and heads of shots, and then I'd have to slow it down and say, okay, well, this is where the creature comes in and goes across the screen here, and they're just pulling stuff from places that they weren't supposed to be, or flopping shots. I flopping shots all the time, or zooming in to get rid of people standing in the shot, or flopping shots because people are crossing the line. The director didn't know what they're doing, so the people are looking in the wrong direction during editing all the time. I mean, there's just a million things that happen. Well, a lot of times the things can be fixed, but it's definitely not a good philosophy to say, to feel like, oh, when I get to post, I'll just fix it all, no matter if I screw up. You know, try not to screw it up before you get to post. So, but yeah, think about post before you get to post. I think about post not during production. I mean, you think about it during production, but really, really think about post during pre-production. Think about what your deliverables are going to be. You know, where is this movie going to end up? And then just make a checklist from there, and start thinking about what frame rate am I shooting at? What's the, am I going to shoot at 4K? Do I need to shoot at 4K? Is that overkill? It depends what you're trying to shoot. If you're shooting a web series, you may not want to shoot 4K. If something like a web series, if it's just going to be internet based, you might just want to shoot regular HD 1080. So I think what I'm saying is you really got to look at what your end result is going to be and plan for that early on.
Yeah, and that's very true. And when I had on Kelly Baker, Kelly also wrote a book called he's called The Angry Filmmaker.
Oh yeah.
And okay, good. Kelly. And then
I've seen his book. Yeah.
And he always talks about audio and the importance of an audio and just making sure that post is just as important as everything else, and not just hey, can you fix a ton of problems while we in post? Can you fix these actors' lines? Can you do this? Can you do that? Yeah. I've seen that too, way too much in films that I've either helped out on. They've said, hey, or this is the problem, and I was like, sorry, man. There was one real quick story. A friend of mine actually made a zombie film, mm-hmm. and the editor that he had just went nutso, and basically they got the footage back, and he asked me if I could help him with it. And the amount of work that film needed.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. They it was just, I remember this because it was just when Adobe Premiere CS5 came out, yeah. 5 or 5.5, and I was playing around with things, and I'm just scrolling through the raw footage, and I'm like, well, these lines got to be redone. I was like, this camera is completely off balance. Yeah. They're in the middle of the woods, and things are looking blue, or things are looking red, and
yeah.
you're like, wow, what the hell is going on here? Mm-hmm. But it's just obviously I'm giving you the concise of the story, but finally what I did was I took the hard drive and I gave it back to him, and I said, this is your problem. I said, I am not directing this thing. I'm sorry. I said, I'm not editing this thing because it would take literally probably by myself. Exactly. Seriously, I'd have to come home right from work and be like, let me just start editing this thing again.
Yeah, no, I've given hard drives back to many producers, many producers. I'll get these things. I know exactly. I can totally relate to what you're saying because I had the same exact problems. I'll get these producers that I was like, hey, they'll bring in their movie and they'll be like, oh yeah, here's the movie, and then of course they never have any money, so it's like, oh yeah, we need to do this and this, and then you look at it and you're like, are you kidding me? This will take more time than it took you to. Not only it would take months to fix. It was just they're that bad sometimes where you get them in and it's just like, man, this thing is so all over the place. The audio is just dreadful. The cameras, the movie, it's just, it would take months to do. And yeah, it pretty much hand it back and say, yeah, sorry, it's your problem. And you don't want that to happen to you as a filmmaker. And that's why I try to tell people hey, when you're making a movie, take post-production very seriously because it can cost you a lot of money, man. If you get to post and things are that messed up, well, you're going to spend probably more money than you spend on your movie trying to fix it all, and it didn't have to be like that. It really doesn't have to be like that. You just need somebody that understands the post process to help you along and say, hey, let's make sure we hire a professional sound. Let's monitor this sound. Let's make sure that we got what we needed here. Let's make sure if we're doing special effects, let's get our visual effects supervisor on set to make sure that we're shooting these plates even right. Or if you can't afford one, then just make sure that you're even shooting a plate, or you're even shooting something that's going to work, So yeah, plan, and don't wait to post because it'll cost you a lot,
Definitely. And also cost you, sometimes they'll even have to do reshoots.
Oh, yeah.
Because what happened was months later, after I gave that hard drive back, they actually came and they said, we're going to start doing reshoots. And I mean, this movie had been in the can for about a year and a half to 2 years at that point. And the actors were like, what happened? What happened with the film? And eventually they had to say, sorry, but, certain things didn't work out right. Long story short, by the way, Danny, that film is still not edited. It's still not released. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago itself. So it's been about 6 years for them.
They're still working on it.
Yep. It's about 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. No. Yeah. Probably never be released. I mean, unless the person that does it themselves. I mean, I don't think any professional post person would take on a project like that, because it's too demanding. There's just too much to do, and they just couldn't afford to, any movie you get is going to be some problems in post, but to avoid them. I mean, I remember cutting, stuff when I cut stuff for Full Moon, there's always problems usually in the movies. I mean, I've cut, like I cut Puppet Master 10, and Puppet Master 9, and God knows how many other crazy films for them. But I mean, the puppet films, that Charlie does, those movies are actually quite. I mean, you may look at it and not think so, but cutting those puppets is actually quite difficult, because they don't move very well, and they take the rods are always there, and they're a little tricky to cut, but they usually do. Second, they usually do another day of pickups with puppets and stuff usually to help with that stuff. But so every movie's got its own bag of problems, but just try to make that bag be a very small bag, I guess is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do imagine those Puppet Master movies have to be hard to edit because, of all of the stop motion involved. I mean, they do. I imagine that's how they do that.
No,
correct?
No, they're not stop motion. Not since Puppet Master 3, I think, or 4. No, maybe 4 or 5. I can't remember if those were stop motion. I think they might have been, but no, they haven't been stop motion for a long time. They're rod. They're just rods. They're rod puppets, pretty much. I mean, like the Ginger Dead Man is just pretty much a hand puppet, and oh God, there's so many. Charlie's got so many bizarre characters, over there. We got the Evil Bong, and we got the King Bong, and we got the Ginger Dead Man, and we got Ooga Booga, and we got oh God, we got all the Puppet Masters, we got the Skull Heads. There's just an endless amount of puppet movies for everyone to watch, but they're I mean, they're tricky. You'd be surprised, those movies, how many effect shots are actually in them, and I would say, I don't know, 200-300 maybe, depending on the film, and it could be anything from just enhancements, like a blink or to string or rod removal kind of work to, just stuff that glows and, lightning bolts and moons and, whatever it may be. There's actually quite a bit of effects works on those movies. But I mean, even my film Ghost Month, I ended up doing some effects where it was originally not going to have any effects in it at all. And I was terrified by the makeup when I first shot it on set. And I was so unhappy with the makeup job. So I ended up giving them a digital makeover in post, what we call digital makeup. And basically take the character and then we go in and we sort of redo that person's makeup to make it scarier and give it a digital makeup version. And it made those scenes much scarier, much better. And I actually did it in my film Real Evil too, the one I just did, the last one I did for Full Moon, a found footage film I did called Real Evil. And some of the makeup in that I thought could be enhanced. It wasn't that I was unhappy with it. I just thought it could be better. It could be enhanced. So we brought, she comes up to the camera and then her face kind of like morphs into this corpse. Well, obviously we couldn't do that practically on set. So those were just digital makeup enhancements that we did in post, but it worked really great for the film, so there's a lot of things you can creatively change in post, that sometimes you don't think of during production, but and that's one thing I've always had a knack for, getting it in. I'm like, hey, let's make his face morph instead. I was like, oh, great. And then we do it and it's like so much better, little things like that.
Oh yeah, and I know you were talking about Pub Master. Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine that those movies must be difficult. I mean, I know some of that stuff, is just unreal because, I mean, even the small stuff that I've done, in terms of like, editing. I mean, some movies are just like, my God. I mean, the reason I brought up stop motion, I had a friend who actually, she asked me to help her on her stop motion, and even doing that and then having to edit it. I mean, it was just so time consuming.
Yeah, stop motion's exactly. I mean, Charlie Bam though, he's he did a lot. He's worked with a lot of stop motion. I mean, from I think Laser Blast, and he had this movie that's still unfinished called Prehysteria, I think. Or no, Primeval. So the Primevals, I think, was something that David Allen was doing, I think, back in the day, but it was all stop motion. I mean, beautiful stuff, really cool stuff. Like like Ray Harryhausen kind of stop motion. It was really, really, really cool stuff. And they still never finished it, though. I don't know. Maybe one day he will, but stop motion. Geesh. Yeah. I mean, effects. I think the biggest film that I did with like the most effects, I think, was probably the film I cut for Sci-Fi Channel. It was a Sci-Fi Channel movie of the week. It was called Ice Spiders, and you can still see it on Sci-Fi, every now and then. But it's just a big spider romp, in the ski lodge, and Patrick Muldoon and all these. It's a fun little movie. It's a popcorn kind of movie, but yeah, that movie had a lot of CG spiders and stuff in it. And actually, Steve Blasini, who did the spider effects, I interviewed him in the Book of the Dead, so he's in there too. But it was a fun film to work on. It took like 3 months though. It was a pretty long process to edit that thing. But yeah, so.
And I know you have a lot of really cool people that you've interviewed. I wanted to ask you, how did you go about, getting a lot of these people for the book?
Well, a lot of them are friends. A lot of them I've known over the years. Most of them, the majority of them, actually, I think probably all of them. I'm trying to think, is there anybody here? Most of the people I'm either just either a colleague or I know personally, or they're a friend. And essentially, I just kind of told them about the book and what I was doing and so on and so forth, and they were usually up for it, and I tend to ask questions in those interviews. Everybody loves the interviews in the book. That's been from the first edition. I know that because, everybody likes everything else in the book, but I'm saying a lot of people really enjoyed the other perspectives from working professionals that were in the book. And what they liked about those interviews the most is that they're not like fanboy questions. They're questions that are very specific to the craft of filmmaking. Very specific to directing or acting or cinematography. I ask very specific questions that and try and get answers back that are like, wow, maybe I didn't even know that when I asked the question, sometimes. And I think that shows when you read the interviews. And the second edition just kind of, and it adds to that, the first edition, I had a lot of great people, James Wan was in the first edition. Of course, now he's making huge movies. Robert Englund, Robert Kurtzman, Sabini, Kaufman. I could go down the list. It's a long list. But the second edition, I added about maybe another 15 people. But I was really happy to have McGarris. Gave a great interview. I got a really awesome interview with John Ottman, composer and editor of the X-Men and Usual Suspects. I got a great interview with Kane Hodder, Tibor Takas, who's the director of Spiders 3D and The Gate, and John Debney, who's the composer of Sin City and End Days. Michael Berryman, Mike Mendez, Neil Marshall Stevens, who wrote 13 Ghosts, Chris Alexander, and Mark Ordesky and Jane Fleming, who were producers on Lovely Molly and that Bigfoot movie Exists. And Mark is also the executive producer of Lord of the Rings trilogy. And he is my mentor, actually. So you ask how I get these interviews. Well, he's been my mentor for 2 years. So I was like, hey, Mark. So no, him and Mark Ordesky and his partner Jane, they gave a really great interview as well. So yeah, it's really. It's really enhances the book to have those in there because it gives perspective. It's not just, hey, let's just listen to what Danny has to say through the whole book. So in the new edition, I interviewed about 15 new people, but overall in the book, there's probably about 30 to 35 people. And they're all working professional people, and it really adds perspective for the readers in the book, and that's why I have them in there, and I hope that the readers will enjoy it. And I'm very excited that the second edition also gets a hardcover edition, which the first one didn't. I'm a big fan of hardcovers, so it's got a hardcover paperback version, and it'll be a digital version. So,
and when's that coming out again?
It comes out on December 16th of this year, 2015. So.
Very cool. Right in time for Christmas.
Right in time for Christmas, yeah. And there's going to be new. I added a lot more. I updated the information, of course. Every chapter's been updated, but I've added a lot more stuff to the website, more behind-the-scenes videos from stuff like a lot of full moon stuff from my film Real Evil. I've got a lot of stuff in the book about that. Revised scripts and schedules and storyboards and all that stuff from some of the newer stuff that I've been working on is all in the book. So yeah, it's just kind of an overhaul, really, an overhaul and some new interviews and some new information and everything. I think one of the chapters that was probably updated the most is probably in the later chapters, which is when it talks more about distribution, because that's really more things that's probably the biggest area that has changed over the last 5 or 6 years since the original book was published. A lot of that information kind of went out of date, but I tried to update it for the new one. So.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, because with advances in technology, it's so fast now.
Mm-hmm.
Your cell phone now can shoot high res video and
oh yeah,
and that's
Sundance. And it's Sundance because this movie at Sundance was shot on a iPhone 6 with an anamorphic attachment.
Yep, that Sean Baker, he was actually on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So I mean, yeah, you could totally do it. And there's an app actually that I use. I think he used it too. It's called Film IC Pro, and it's like an $8 app, But I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, I used it to shoot some live performances the other day, and it's just great. I mean, you really could. It's already been proven, but you can really take your phone and go out and shoot a movie if you wanted to. Just be careful about the audio, though. That's the only thing. Just make sure you have a professional audio person somewhere around to make sure you're getting good audio. So
yeah, he did have a professional audio audio engineer because what he did was for pre-production, he made sure to tell everyone. He goes, "Now listen, we're going to shoot this on an iPhone. Now hear me out."
Right.
Because as soon as you do that, a lot of actors were probably like, "Oh, what the fuck did I get myself into?"
Yeah, I know. They're like, "Oh, this is so unprofessional." Yeah, no. I mean, the cameras are just getting smaller and smaller. I mean, I go to an NAB, the NAB show every year, which is the big geek post-production show in Las Vegas. And I was there this year, and I was just there's the red coming out has a new camera, the Red Weapon, which is incredible, mm-hmm. And then there's the RE Alexa Mini. It's like the mini version of that one. I mean, there's just Black Magic's got their new cameras and everything. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff that's coming out now, and the cameras are just getting smaller and smaller, and the the resolution is just getting higher and higher. I mean, we're talking about doing 8K now, So it's like at some point, it's like, gosh, 8K, man, you're going to see every nose hair, and it's amazing what can be done. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're still telling a story, because the camera, I mean, Stuart me and Stuart used to always talk about this, because Stuart, he wouldn't, we would maybe talk about tech sometimes, and he would be like, well, it doesn't matter because it's still just another place to put another box to put a lens on. It's still about the story. It's about the story. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because I would go on some like tech rant about something, about some new camera, and he would just look at me like, what are you talking about? So, yeah, all it matters is the script. All it matters is the story you're trying to tell. I mean, cameras are great. The tech part of it's great. And that's all very important, because you want it to look good. You want to tell the story visually and the best you can. And so that's all important to know, but just don't lose track, of what's really important. And that, of course, is the story, is the script, is our characters.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Whenever I hear about, the newest comic coming out, I mean, it's great. I think some people get lost in that and they end up buying the new DSLR instead of worrying about like, is the script solid? Well, who cares? We got the new Canon, 5D or whatever. And I think that's also where, a lot of this is taking us. I mean, today YouTube announced that they're going to start allowing 8K video. Well, most people don't have 8K monitors.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. 8K video. I mean, at some point, that's, unless you're doing like effects work, or something. I mean, it's like, it's to me personally, I'm a techie guy. I'm a geek guy. I love that stuff. I love to know about the new cameras and what they can do, and it's important for a filmmaker to have that understanding of what's available, the tools that are available technically to accomplish your vision. That's all very important. But at the same time, like 8K, really. I mean, like I would take. If I could go out and shoot an 8K movie right now, I would just take an Arri Alexa and I would go out and I would just shoot it. I would shoot 2K with an Arri Alexa, and I would have a great looking movie, an amazing looking movie. So it just it just depends. They just don't get don't let the technology fool you, because a lot of people do that. They do come in and say, I got the new 8K and you can shoot this and you can shoot that and you can do all this stuff, and it's like, well, that's all great and dandy, but what are you going to shoot? Oh, well, they're still working on the script. It's like, I got all this gear, but I don't have anything to shoot. It's like, maybe you should have put some of that money into the development. Maybe you should have put some of that money into the screenwriting, into the story. Because I see people that they spend like nothing on the script, I've paid writers, I've hired plenty of writers over the years, but to not really spend time during that script stage, it's just it's a shame. And a lot of the professional indie stuff that I've seen done and put out has not spent enough time in that area, and I think the movies suffer when that happens. So definitely don't worry about 8K. Just worry about your screenplay, and if you need to shoot at 2K, 4K, that's fine. Don't worry about 8K yet.
Yeah, it's funny to just to add on to that. I had a friend of mine, his brother ended up becoming friends with somebody, and they're always talking about, shooting movies. Well, the friend happens to be, kind of from a wealthy family. So one day this wealthy friend goes out and he just buys camera and tripod and this stuff. Well, they don't have a script to shoot. So now they're like, I'm going to spend a month, writing the script and getting in a good, using the camera, and then we're going to make something. And I'm sitting there going, and I'm sitting there, Danny, and I'm saying to myself, should I even talk to them about how stupid this idea is, or should I just let them roll that dice? And you know what? Eventually, you just sort of get tired of trying to give advice, and then people just going, "Oh, no, we got it." You're like, "All right, you know what? Yeah. I've been doing this since 2007. I know you've been doing this since not 2000, 1999."
Well, I've been making movies since I was young, but I mean, as far as professionally, probably since '99. Yeah.
That's professionally, because then But
that was after film school. Yeah, professionally, 1999.
Okay, and with that experience, I sometimes I've met people during my time doing this, and I'm like, I tried to help people in the beginning by saying like, guys, this isn't like we talked about earlier, with the budget, sometimes this isn't doable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes some people will listen, but most people are just like, no, we got it. We're going to use Aunt Susie's house, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And you're like, and then you talking to them later on, and they didn't either. They either A, made it, and it just, it needs to be finished, and that's never going to happen, or it was just terrible, or B, they never got around to actually shooting that.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I hear you, man. It's like, it's like with anything too. I mean, you don't, you get all like you said, this guy, he bought all this gear, and then they worry about it later to go shoot the movie. I mean, it's like, would you just go out and pick up a violin and then like a week later go on stage and perform it in front of a bunch of people? Would you do that?
Yeah.
Of course you wouldn't. Exactly. It takes practice. It's a craft. You have to learn. You'd learn music. You have to learn. First, and then you do it. And it doesn't matter the quality of the violin that the guy bought. Bought some top of the line violin that was like, yeah, this is the best violin on the planet. It's got gold strings. It's got gold. And it's like, it doesn't matter. You don't know how to play it, so what difference does it make? I mean, you really got to spend the time where you need to spend the time to make a movie, and all of that's going to come down to the writing, to the script, and I mean, I've gone out, like I said before, I've gone out of the gate before with scripts that weren't ready, and the end results are they're tragic. It's like, oh God, if I just would have, and I think. And the stuff, you see it out there all the time. You'll see movies that have the same problems, and you're like, wow, if they just would have spent more time in the script stage, or different, or didn't hire their parents to play the leads, you might have had something else here,
Yeah, exactly, and that's something that hopefully who's ever listening to this, and if you're actually making your first film, a student film, whatever you want to call it, you've taken some of this advice, because because I mean it's so important, all this stuff. Because you also, there's a saying I once heard: you could tell who your friends are if you ask them to A, move, or B, to make a movie.
Yeah, no, exactly. I wouldn't let anybody shoot in my. I'd be like, so you want to shoot in my house? No way, get out. No, but but you don't look. I don't want to. I hope I'm not. I don't want to discourage people from going out. I mean, to make a film, if you don't have like the proper money or the budget to buy it. Like if you're a student and you're making a student movie, you work with what you got, and what is great about filmmaking, what's great about storytelling is that, you just look at your circumstances and you say, you know what, okay, I have to make a movie. I'm in film school or whatever. I need to make something. What do I have? Write it down on a piece of paper. I have $2,000. I have $1,000. I have $500. I have access to a camera. I have access to a dorm room. I have access to my car. My dad owns a business, so I could shoot in his shop. So at the school it has a lighting. You write all that stuff down, and then you start planning. You start thinking. And if you already have an idea written or you already have a script written, write what you have available to you first. Look at your script and say, how can I rework my idea, retell this story using, what I've written down over here, using these resources. And you'll be very surprised what you come up with. In fact, it's a great exercise for you to do it that way, because it really will develop you as the kind of filmmaker that can be thrown into any situation, and not fall down face first. That's how I learned. I think that's how a lot of people at Roger Corman learned. They were thrown into situations where they're just like, man, how the hell am I supposed to shoot there's a robot in the script? And what you mean that's what I'm supposed to use as the monster, that terrible monster makeup? Oh my God, no. And then you're thrown into this situation, and you don't, you have to say, this is what I have. How can I still make this how can I still tell this story? How can I still make this interesting? And it could be a lot of different things. And that's what makes you as a filmmaker unique, is how you tell that story your own way, your point of view, your vision, the way you were thrown into that situation and made it work. Because somebody else being thrown into that position, they're going to do it a different way. A third person thrown into that, they're going to do it a different way. Everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. And what that is, it could be maybe you light it differently. Maybe you only show a little bit of the monster's face. I've done that many times. There's a lot, because that happens sometimes. Sometimes that you get to set and things, even if you did, you did it in pre-production and you did some makeup tests and whatnot, and you're like, oh yeah, this looks great. But sometimes you get them on set and you look through the viewfinder and you're like, gosh, this isn't working, and then you need to, you got a crew standing around who's all getting paid and money's going out the window, and you have to shoot something. You just can't say, let's forget it and shoot it another day. And you don't have the money to do that. So you have to really think on your feet. And for me, as a filmmaker and having made, a lot of different films over the years, that for me was a great way to learn to how to make movies and how to just go with the flow and work with things that are given to me and not complain and just get it done and figure out creative solutions to things. And if you can figure out creative solutions to filmmaking problems, a lot of times those creative solutions can be a lot better than what you had planned. That's my opinion.
And that's great, Danny. And I don't think it's discouraging at all. I know we have been talking about budgets and stuff like that. Basically, my whole thing has always been just to be honest with people and upfront with people.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Because especially nowadays, because everyone who has an iPad thinks they're a filmmaker, and
Yeah.
a lot of the times, they don't understand what exactly entails.
Right.
Really, really quickly, and we'll wrap this up because I know you have to go. I've been bending your ear for.
No, my pleasure.
But I had a friend of mine. I went to high school with this guy, and he one day we were, we got together at a friend's birthday, and he says to me, he's like, I'm actually writing a screenplay, and he's like, I want you to take a look at it. And I said, I really, unless I really know you for a while, I really don't read your screenplay. Well, he sent it over anyway, and I read it, and I opened it up, and it was in Microsoft Word, so right away there's a red flag, and
Right.
the formatting was all off, everything was off, and I said back to him, I said, if you couldn't even look, I mean, you have the computer in your pocket is more powerful than what sent the men to the moon in the 1969. If you can't even just look up and say to yourself, how the hell should a script look, then there's really no hope for you.
Oh God, man, me and you. I think we could talk for an hour on this one because I know exactly what you're saying. I read a lot of scripts. I get a lot of scripts. I have an extensive collection of screenplays at home as well, and one of my biggest pet peeves, besides the script, character and everything else, but one of my biggest pet peeves with scripts is formatting and craft. And it's amazing to me when I read screenplays how half-assed they are when and it's like, wow, did you not read, that you're not supposed to capitalize this and there's, it's distracting to the reader. And if the reader, if you're sending it to me as a producer, and you're like, hey, check out my screenplay, it's really awesome. And I look at it and I read it and I see, and I'm reading it and it's like, it's actually distracting for me to read it because your formatting is so off. I won't read it. I mean, I was a screenplay, or I was a judge for a screenplay competition years ago, and I got a bunch of scripts and I read them and everything. And and the way I judge is very simple. I read the first 10 pages. I won't read anymore. That's it. If you get me in the first 10 pages, I'll read the full script. If you don't, I just won't continue. And the most of the ones that came in for the competition, I couldn't get past page 10 because I just couldn't. And that's just kind of how it is. With it. And but format is so important. So if you're going to write your own script, that's great. But really, really study the craft. There's plenty of books out there on script formatting and style, and for God's sakes, read other screenplays. There is an infinite amount of professionally published screenplays out there. Newmarket Press and a lot of these other publishers that have published scripts over the years. Get some of those scripts, read those scripts, see how the formatting is done, and the other reason for that too, is when it comes time to scheduling your script, like say you wrote the script yourself and you didn't follow any sort of, proper formatting or style. When it comes time for the line producer or for someone, or maybe you're doing it yourself, to actually take that script and break it down, if you didn't format it properly, it's going to be a nightmare for you to schedule, to try to figure out, okay, well, what characters are in this scene? Well, I don't know. There's no scene heading. Or why is one scene heading here, but they're actually in 2 or 3 different scenes because it wasn't broken up properly. It wasn't formatted properly. So when it comes time to scheduling, you're going to be all over the place. Like I get that sometimes. I get a script in and it's like, guys, you got to rewrite this so it can be scheduled. I mean, because it's not, you've got a scene heading here, but these people are actually in literally three different locations. They're like, oh, well, it starts in the garage, but then he runs outside and he's down the street, and then and none of that didn't start with new slug lines, and that's a problem for scheduling, of course. But little things like that. So, not to go on a rant about it, but I'm just saying, definitely get your script format and style in order before you start scheduling your script, and everyone will thank you for it, particularly your line producer.
Oh yeah, and absolutely, and also there's screenwriting software. There's there's, if you want free, there's Celtics or Celtics.
Yeah.
There's then all the way up until the most expensive one, which is Final Draft.
Final Draft 9. I use Final Draft 9. Final Draft 9 is great if you can afford it. I don't know if they have student kind of stuff for it, but there's then there's a Screenwriter, which is cool too. But yeah, there are free ones out there that you can get. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so everyone, this is it was a great time talking with Danny. Danny, in closing, where can people find you at online?
Well, I'm very active in social media, so most of the time. But please, feel free to come to Facebook and just look me up, Danny Draven, and just you can friend me if you want. I'll friend you back or accept it. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Danny Draven, I think is my handle on Twitter. And pretty much Facebook and Twitter is where I hang. Yeah, so definitely come and say hi and follow what's going on. There's a lot going on, So the book's coming out, and I am making a new horror anthology film for Terror Films here. We're shooting it in August, so there's a new movie coming. And the book, December 16th, second edition, and I hope everyone likes that one. And more movies to come after that, more and more. So
awesome. Everyone, you can find me at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Danny, I want to say thank you very much for coming on. I hope everyone, I know everyone has, Danny and I have been, talking for about an hour and a half, and I know we've covered a lot, but I'm telling you, if you just listen and take any notes, there was a wealth of info from this. And, Danny, I wish you the best of luck, and, let me know if you ever want to come back on. I'd love to have you on as a guest again.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. I enjoy talking about making movies. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written 3 books. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you and to answer questions for people and try to help them out. That's actually why I wrote the book in the first place. It wasn't about money or anything. Believe me, when I get that 63-cent royalty check in the mail, it's not about the money. It was about helping people make their movies, make them the best they can, and introduce a lot of information to them to sort of help them avoid the pitfalls along the way. So with that said, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, Danny. And remember, check it out, everyone. I will link to it in the show notes. It's The Filmmaker's Book of the Dead. Second edition is coming out December the 16th of this year. Danny, I wish you the best.
All right, man.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.